It's the OccultPod. Welcome to OccultPod. We talk about conspiracies and other different things about the simulation. Welcome to OccultPod. Welcome to OccultPod. Hope you enjoy the show.
Hey guys, welcome back to this episode, and today we've got Julian on, and welcome to the pod, Julian.
Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me, guys.
Thanks,
Welcome,
guys,
bro.
and for the audience tuning in and listening. Hopefully, you've actually stuck to your New Year resolutions instead of quitting. But with Julian, initially, we're going to talk about a range of topics. But me personally, I'd like to ask him because he's been, last year he's had a pretty insane year traveling the world and visiting many different countries as a digital nomad. So I just wanted to ask you, what is life like as a digital nomad, and what are the positives and negatives you've had from your experiences of living that free lifestyle?
I'd say like life is like when you actually do the experience, it's really cool, especially if you do it the way that I do it, where like I never travel alone, I always travel with friends, right? I always travel with guys from my community. So it's really cool to do that, especially when you're in like a place that allows you to do cool shit, right? So for example, right now I'm in Malta. I'm on like an island where there's only old people. There's nothing to do, right? So there's no cool shit to do here, and that's the purpose, because I just want to work. But most time spent last year was in Mauritius, where it's a tropical island. You know, you can just do so much cool shit there. You can like hike and see waterfalls and that kind of stuff. So it's worth the experience, but I've definitely noticed a lot of like negatives as well. And like it sounds a bit privileged, right? Because like obviously like I'm privileged to be in that position, to be able to like travel and like live a cool life and like go on all these adventures. But I think like you have to be like, before you start into this life, you have to be very intentional, like why you do it. And like for me, I just want to do it because I wanted the experience. And I think like to anyone listening, if you want to do it for the experience, you definitely should. But at the same time, you realize it's not as good as it seems. Like, it's not as glorified, because there's gonna be cutoffs, right? Like when you travel, like you can't, like, especially like when you run a business, you can't work the entire day that you're traveling, right? You're like, you first have to get accustomed to like where everything is at, right? Like you have to find like good places where you work at, the gym, whatever. You have to like get settled into your new location, that kind of stuff. You have to like try and find like a social life, like make new friends, and like that's part of the fun as well. But like in terms of like business growth, like you will have a lot of setbacks, because it just takes some time to like travel to new countries, get set up there, everything. And then especially if it's like what most people want to do, right? Like most people, when they say like digital nomadism, it's like the guy in Bali who sits at the beach, drinks from a coconut, and works on his laptop, right? But that is like downsides as well. When it's like very hot, it's a bit suboptimal to work. Like you have to be inside rooms where there's like AC and that kind of stuff, and like you're sweating a lot of the time. And then also, like, if you're in a cool place, you just want to explore, you just want to go do shit, right? So there is definitely ups and downs, and I'd say like I I was fortunate enough to like kind of like be able to handle both, where I had like a shit ton of fun, like I met so many friends, I went on so many adventures, but at the same time, like I also just wanted to like focus on work, and that took a huge like backseat there, because I just did all of these other things. And so I think you just have to be aware of that, like what is actually the intention of it. And like right now, kind of like the where my mind is at, it's like I still will travel a bit this year, but my focus is more on finding like one spot where I can settle down for like long term, and just really focus on building, and really focus on like business and health, because as I just said, like that's the things that they kind of suffer when you do that. And I think like everyone eventually realizes, like I have friends who travel and their business gets worse, and I know people who are traveling and they grow the business, they make more deals, more money, whatever. So like it's possible in both ways. But I feel like most guys, they come to this realization eventually, like after they've lived it, that if you really like you want to think long term, you want to build like a great vision with your business, you have to like settle down, you have to have a routine, you have to, have everything in place in order for you to succeed. And that's kind of like where mine is at right now. I want to find that place where I want to like settle down and just hone in and just build something great and really focus on entrepreneurship above traveling, because traveling's cool, but like if you think long term and you really, you're in it for because you love the game, I feel like you have to like put that on like a backseat and like focus more on the bigger vision that you're building. And you can still combine both of that, right? Like you can work for like most of the year and then in the summer like travel a bit more, whatever. That's just like kind of like where my mind is at the moment.
Yeah, so no, it's very interesting that you'd be so honest and so transparent about the fact that it's actually quite difficult to live a nomad lifestyle and still balance the ability to run a business on the side. Would you say that it's more beneficial to you if it's part of your branding that you would be involved in some sort of traveling? So like for the FSC, for example, which is obviously the business that you run with Sean, who we previously had on the podcast, it is in tandem with the branding that you would travel, because you need to show all these cool places. You need to demonstrate to people that you live in this exotic lifestyle. How much do you factor that in when you're considering the fact that maybe I might need to find a base for this operation? Is that something that you're worried about? Do you think it would impact the business if you began to just stay in one position, in one place? Or do you think that it would actually be an evolution for the business in terms of the fact that then you'd be able to have a home base or like a headquarters essentially, and you'd be able to every now and then go traveling with the boys and things like that?
Yeah. I think it's all about balance. Like, as you said, like obviously like that's something that's like a good point you brought up there. Like for the business I'm running, like I kind of have to show that lifestyle just because that's like what sells, what people kind of expect, where we get most of our content from, stuff like that. I think it's probably about finding balance, because like I have a friend who does something very similar to what I've been doing. And I think he said like in the last year, he's only ever been like in one spot for like 2 weeks at a time. He was always traveling and he was burned out by the end. And like now he settled down, now he has a space, now he's just focusing on running the operation. And so that's definitely a big factor. That's impacting you. And so I think it's probably the way that I see it is I'm gonna have like one base and then I'm just gonna like organize certain trips that are specific to FSC. And then, like that's where I get to do the traveling and where it's more like the marketing side then, right? Because then obviously like you have like the bunch of the boys, you have the content, whatever, you can get exactly what you need from that. And then after the event, after the week or 2 weeks, whatever, then you can like be back home and just, use all of that and like push forward. I think it's about finding the right balance, but I think like just like this lifestyle with like always traveling, always on flights, always, like going to new countries, I think like that messes with your mind over the long term. I mean, like I haven't been doing as much traveling as other people. And also said like I have one friend, he's only stayed in one place for 2 weeks last year. He's been to like 50 countries, and like he's burned out. Like he was in such a shit position. So it's definitely like hard to like balance that, but like I see everyone ultimately, finding the base and not prioritizing travel as much and rather focusing on, like health and entrepreneurship and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that is the most important thing. I mean, going forward, say 20 years time, not to get all conspiratorial. I mean, we are the OccultPod after all, but in the future, we probably are going to need these communities, these bases that are off grid essentially. And that would involve being in one place. You wouldn't want to move the operation around in different places. So for say the FSC, for example, obviously you want to have like a base somewhere elsewhere that's a bit off grid. I think we already spoke with Sean about this, to be fair, where we discussed like how you had plans potentially to find somewhere that was distant and far away. And it would just become a base for people who want to, seek sanctuary there or whatever. Depending on how the state of the world actually goes, if it doesn't turn out how we expect it at this point, then it might not be an issue. But I think that is essential to human nature, is that we need a base, we need a home. I think we're somewhat ingrained in our psyche to need somewhere to nest. It's the same for the entire animal kingdom. I mean, birds have a nest. Granted, they move from place to place, but that's depending on the seasons and how their biology is working at the time. But most animals do just have one base location that they stay in. And I think if you're moving away all the time and you're going to different countries, like you said, your friends moving to 50 different countries throughout the year, that's really going to put you off kilter, because obviously you've got the whole jet lag, you've got the whole culture shift that you're probably not used to. So as much as, yeah, you go into these different countries and you're seeing, oh, it's nice weather here, at the same time, you're not really going to have time to ingrain yourself into the culture and actually understand and fully digest what's actually happening around you, if that makes sense. So, like you say, I do think it is probably beneficial to just stay in one position. And like you say, for the health side of things, it's not beneficial for your psyche, which then in turn affects your physical health as well. As we know, like the mind and body are linked. They're very succinct with each other and work in tandem. What would you say is the most important lesson that you've learned in the past year from traveling and doing digital nomading, is, if there is anything?
That's a really good question. I'd say you just have to be like disciplined with it. Like, as I said, like, you know, like when you're in a cool place, you just want to have fun all the time. Like you just want to be exploring, adventuring, and I love that, right? Like I think like for all of us as young men, we just have that adventure spirit. Like if we're high testosterone, right? We don't, like, you guys can probably relate, right? You don't want to sit in front of a computer, play video games anymore, right? Like we're too old for that. We just want to do like real shit, right? We just want to be in the real world. And so that's something you just like want to chase, like that's the natural high. But then if that becomes that all you do, then obviously, like I said, like the business side suffers, like, and that's something you still have to put work into, right? Like that still like takes time out of the day. And so I think just being disciplined with it to, you know, sit down and actually do the work. And like what I've noticed, like a lot of the times, like you can get your work done in a couple hours if you actually like do the work and you focus on it and you prioritize like what's important and like what needs to get done. And then obviously like further down the line, like you can set up automations, whatever, you can hire people to do stuff like that. But I think just, you know, like realize like if you only prioritize like fun and adventure, like it's also going to be detrimental like to your health. Like I realized when after like a week where we only did stuff like that, I was burned out. Like I had adrenal fatigue because I had so much adrenaline and dopamine all the time. I just felt fucking like down. Like I just want to sleep all day long. And so I think it's just like having that balance there, right? Where you're like, okay, this time of the day is dedicated towards working. This time of the day is where I get my important tasks done. And then, you know, later on, that's when I can do like more of the other stuff, explore the culture, whatever, be in the sun my balls, whatever, you know.
Yeah, you can't forget that, man. Obviously, that high testosterone you want to reach. I've only done it once. I've only done it once, but you know, based on where I'm at currently, the weather, I don't think I can do it now. Otherwise, they would be frozen. But yeah, it is important because obviously, you know, when you go to different countries and it looks amazing, you have to treat it as if it's some sort of reward. You know, get the work done first and then explore afterwards. Because I think people can get too distracted in that it's almost like you're going on holiday, but it's not really a holiday. You're there to work, and then after that, you enjoy the lifestyle that it has. So I think that was a good summary of that question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's like what I realized, like if you look at social media, I feel like there's like certain like archetypes for like travelers, you know, like there's like the backpackers, and then there's people, you know, like who might work in hostels, whatever, like when they're in foreign countries to earn like a bit of money, and then also like there's the digital nomads. And I think you just have to be intentional about like what it is you choose, because like if you are first and foremost an entrepreneur, a business person, right, then that should be the priority. Like then the priority should be growing the business, right? And I feel like like even for like myself, like last year, I was more of like one of these like travel ho influencers, almost in a way, like where I just wanted to do like cool shit and like show it off to the world. And like that's okay if that's who you want to be, but like if you just do it for the lifestyle, then you're not going to be able to actually build something great. And like these last couple of weeks, like now that I'm settled down like here in Malta and I'm going to stay here for a bit, I just realized, honestly, like what I really want to do is just build. What I really want to do is just, like be an entrepreneur, and that means like building a business. That means building a product, right? And that's like opposite to what a lot of people are doing, who say like they just live for the experiences and because they want to like be like that like travel guy online who like posts like travel content every single day. And I think it's just finding out, okay, like what's your intention behind it? Like, is your number one priority because you want to like build a business, or because you want to travel and you want to have all these experiences? And like I said, like for myself, when I first started doing this, I was like, okay, I just want to be like this travel guy, right? Like, and look at me, I made it. But then I realized, like I'm not gonna make it if that's all I'm gonna focus on. And like there are so many people that live that way online, but they're not really entrepreneurs. Like they're backpackers, as I said. Like they're the guys who earn a bit of money for like brand deals on social media, and they just really have like a lifestyle business, like where they just make enough to support their lifestyle to be able to keep going. But they don't really try to build like big visions like into the future. They don't really try to learn skills, learn the game of business to then build like something sustainable long term, right? And so I think it's just gotta be like honest with yourself, like where you are and like what you do. And if you realize, okay, actually what I want to be is an entrepreneur, then that's where you have to prioritize, right? Then you have to say, okay, that's gotta be my priority, instead of like traveling and like only doing it for the lifestyle.
I think you've got to get it out of your system to a degree, though, don't you? It's like,
yeah,
all these older people that you're knocking around with, they'll always be like, oh, look, if you're not going traveling yet, you need to go. You need to go while you're young. You need to have the experience of going traveling. Don't miss out. It's the best experience of your life. So I do think there is some wisdom to that. I do think you need to get it out of your system, because unless you've got something out of your system, there's always going to be that curiosity there. And with that curiosity, you're not going to be able to focus on what you're doing in the minute, because your mind's going to be elsewhere, thinking like, oh, I could be off in Barbados right now. Could be off in the Caribbean, sunning it up. But I'm here. So I think to a degree, you do need to get it off your chest. You do need to have some sort of experience with like traveling the world before you can come to the realization, like you've said, that maybe it's not the most beneficial thing for you. Do you know what I mean? And as much as people would tell you, like, for example, you saying, oh, it's best to have a home base and just stay at home, you can only fully digest and internalize that lesson if you've experienced it yourself and come to that conclusion.
Exactly, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, this is the whole thing with, like, sorry to go off on a bit of a tangent, but with the whole self-help side of things and YouTube and self-improvement, I think you can give as much wisdom as you possibly can, but the real teacher in the situation is experience, after all. And if you've not experienced the things that you're watching or you're digesting, then, like you were saying before we started the podcast, it's just dopamine, essentially. It's self-masturbation. You're not actually learning anything from what you're watching. You're just ingesting something that's giving you a boost because you're thinking, oh, I'm learning from this. But you don't actually internalize it properly. It's only once you've been through the fire and you've actually seen it for yourself that you can fully come to that conclusion and then go from there.
Exactly, yeah. No, 100% agree.
To potentially move on from this conversation, I would love to speak about, because obviously we're the OccultPod, me and Ngombe, so we have sort of skewed views about what God is, how God operates, how the universe works. Like in the past, we've talked about gematria and who is actually controlling this reality. Like we have Sylvia on the podcast who talks about like the demiurge and things like that. So it's not exactly a friendly force that controls this reality, and we're in some sort of simulacrum. I believe is how you say it. So it's like it's not a simulation. It's almost a hyper-realized reality. That's the best way I can describe it, if that makes sense at all. What drew you closer to God? Because I know you are Christian at the minute. Was there anything in particular, anything that occurred any situation that you went through to come to the conclusion that, oh, God is real? Or was it sort of a slow transition of different events that led you to that conclusion?
Like honestly, looking back, I think it played out over like a couple of years from, you know, me believing in God first and then ultimately believing in Jesus as well, which I think is a difference. Like that's what makes you Christian, right? And so I said like the first time that I really like had faith in God, which is so ironic. Like I feel like that just kind of describes perfectly why you can't do life without God. Is when I was 14, I was like a hyper atheist. I hated people who believed in God. I thought they were all weak. You know, they needed to make something up in their mind to, you know, to make life make sense, whatever. I was like, this is the biggest bullshit ever. Like people who are religious, they're so stupid. And the interesting thing is, that was like when I was 14 was the first time I was in love. And I got my heart broken, man. I got my heart broken badly. And I'm telling you, the next day, bro, I was on my knees saying, please make this go away. Like, this is so bad. Like, I'm so heartbroken. Please just, you know, God, like, help me out there. Like, it switched in an instant. And, like, I always, like, look back laughing at that story because I feel like that's kind of, like, the reality of it. Like, you try to do things yourself, whatever, and then God is showing you, like, you can't do it yourself, you know, like, you need him. And so that's when I first, like, started believing in something, right? And then over like the next couple of years, like I was always a bit like going around, like I was spiritual, whatever, believing in the universe. And I'd say like I only really started believing in like Jesus and like, you know, like the Christian theology towards the summer of 2022, because there was a time there was a lot of confusion in my life. Like, you know, I was about to go to university and I didn't really want to, like I felt like I was just being pressured into it. And that's like how ultimately, you know, like my decision came to like, you know, like move out to a tropical island with some guys from the internet and, you know, like do like this digital nomad lifestyle to like kind of escape like that like 9 to 5 like normal kind of path. And like I was so confused on like what to do and like how to like go forward in life with that. And so during that time, like I really started seeking God, and like I was influenced by a lot of people around me who were already Christian or like who were kind of preaching it. And so I got kind of curious about that. And I was like, you know, looking like for signs, and you know, like I was like before that I was just believing in the universe, and then I started calling it God again. And then like someone asked me a question that really like stuck with me. He said like, you know, like if you're praying, how do you know like who answers? You know, like how do you know like you're praying to the ultimate good? You know, like how do you know like it's not the devil or like some demonic force, whatever, right? And that struck fear in me. I was like, how do I know like I'm praying to the right God? How do I know I'm praying to like what is ultimately good? And that led me down to started reading the Bible, right? And so I started reading the Gospels, and it just started making sense to me. It was okay, I think Jesus is God. I think this is the right way. And I started, you know, addressing him in my prayers, and that just gave me a lot more peace. Like I don't know why it was that sentence specifically, but like something struck such fear in me when I heard, you know, like how do you know like God is actually like the real God is answering, not something else. And I was like, shit, you know, that's scary. Like I don't want to pray to, I don't know, the devil or something like that, right? So I think that's really what pushed me to seek out the truth. And like for me, like I found that in the Bible, I found that in the resurrection story of Jesus Christ, and that's why I came to follow him and to like now be a Christian.
Do you feel like following the Christian God? That's a very interesting story, by the way. I think a lot of people go through that same journey, don't they, where it's sort of the atheists because they think they're more intelligent than everyone else, and they think, oh, yeah, God doesn't exist because of ABC, and it's usually quite conventional from like a science point of view, and it's very logical. And then you go into the spirituality side of things. I feel like the new age sort of spirituality is quite prominent at the minute. It's been pushed quite fervently down people's throats that, oh, you need to meditate, you need to get in touch with your spirit angels and stuff like that. And it does kind of seem demonic, like not to become too Christian point of view or anything like that. It does seem demonic. It does seem like, what are these entities that you're letting in? They don't seem to be good. They don't seem to have your best interests at heart. And then obviously like you transition over to the Christian side of things where you you believe in a more structured God, someone who is almost like a father figure who's like quite tough on you, which is to test you, I guess, in the same aspect. Do you think that having that God there, for example, has made you more disciplined and made you care more about life and how you go about life and how you present yourself from day to day?
Definitely, yeah. Like actually, like what you just said, like having the father figure and like having someone who kind of like holds you accountable. Like it's something like last year, like it was one of the best years of my life, and also like I also had like one of the lowest lows in my life, right? And that's how I really like strengthened my faith like this last year. And I reflect a lot on it, like why is it that we still go through suffering, right? Why is it that we still go through pain when, like if God is cool, whatever. And something that's like a realization I made is, like if you look at the Christian story, right, then what you believe in is that the ultimate punishment for like your sins and like what you did wrong, Jesus took that on the cross, right? So like God is not punishing you anymore. He punished him for that in the like most brutal way ever, right? Like so that you can be free from that. And so then everything that happens to you that you might seem as like negative and like, like it's not going your way. It's not because you're being punished, but it's because you're being tested. It's because God is molding you into the person that he wants you to become, right? And so I think Alex Hormozi spoke about a similar concept in one of his podcasts. He said, like, if you had to create a human being, like what would you do to make them a certain way, right? Like if you want to make them strong, if you want to make them patient, if you want to make them kind, right? You would test them, right? Like if you want to make someone patient, you don't give them what they want immediately, right? Like you have them wait for it, so they learn patience. If you want to make someone strong, you have to put them through difficulty, right? And so that's kind of like the way I feel about God right now. Is like the only like whenever things aren't going your way, it's because you're being tested and because you're like being like there's this analogy of like like a blade has to go through the fire and like you have to hammer it and like then like put it in the fire again and like make it like really strong. I feel like that's kind of like the way it is with you as well. Like God is just making you like the best possible weapon, like he's making you strong. And so I think that has given me a lot of I know like a lot of hope, just like like whenever I'm going through something, it's like not because I'm being punished, but because I'm being molded into this like person that I should be, and like that my future self can be better because of that. And I also like now that I have like this more like structured goal, whatever, I believe that I wouldn't be put through anything that I couldn't handle. So that's something that also gives me a lot of hope, where it's like I would never face a challenge that I couldn't handle. So like if I'm in this position, then God said, okay, you're strong enough to go through this and I'm with you. And so that's kind of like how I feel about this. And like as you said, like the analogy of the father is a very good analogy, because like if you think about your own father, like your physical one, right? Dads are usually tougher on the children, right? Like they expect more from you, especially when you're their son, right? Because they want to see you win, like they genuinely want you to become a better man than them, right? So that's why they're hard on you, that's why they're tough on you, that's why they test you, right? I think it's the same way with like your heavenly father, with God, that he tests you to make you strong, to make you a better man, to ultimately, be there for your family and fulfill your purpose in this world.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And because like when I first listened to you and got introduced to you by Kevin's previous podcast, I know you was into philosophy at the time, and obviously through that you had to undergo a transformation, as with Kevin and Zell as well. So it is pretty unique and interesting that you've gone through that stage, and it's happened with many people that me and Ron both know that have transitioned from the New Age into Christianity. Like, let's just say as is, the New Age is pretty deceptive. I've not gone through that myself, but I know that from what I hear, it's not as pleasant as it seems. So you found your truth, and ultimately that's the main thing, make the truth your own. So
exactly, yeah. I'm just curious, like what you guys believe in. Like, do you believe in God? Do you like what's kind of like your spiritual, theological viewpoint of the world?
Yeah, so I do believe in God. I do believe in that sense. I believe in more towards like because I'm Congolese, so I believe more in our Congolese version of God. So I am I would say religious. I've never really fell into like the Christian belief. I mean, I have been exposed to it before, but in terms of context with Congo, it was a religion that was imposed on our people. So, like my family traditionally, we practiced the traditional religion, but the Christianity was put into us. But my parents only realized that for us it wasn't the wrong. It wasn't the wrong thing. It was the wrong thing at the time. So we found our truth with Congolese spirituality and that religion. So in a sense, what you said is similar things to what we've gone through, but just in a different religion, in a sense. So, yeah, God is
Yeah.
real, and I still believe in that because ultimately you can't believe that there's no such thing as one. For me, that doesn't make sense. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a short summary of my story and my belief.
Nice. That's very interesting.
For myself, I think it's a matter of discernment and trying to. I'm kind of going through a transitionary period where I'm trying to work out what I actually believe in. I think because I've been through so much and so many different situations, and like on this podcast, we talk about different theories. So I'd say, in the same vein as Ngombe, I do believe in a God. I do believe that there's a God there. It's more for me the idea of organized religion in a sense. I don't know if that's because of how the church has manifested over the past 100 or few hundred so years, that I don't really trust that way of Christianity. Do you know what I mean? There's so many different sects, there's so many different sorts of beliefs, and everyone's so fervent in how they believe in God. I think for me personally, it's more about the personal relationship you have with God.
Exactly.
And it's not necessarily that the church is bad, but at the same time, it is kind of an organized place for people. Like, for example, you see priests, they often have multiple houses because they're funding a lot of money to themselves and saying it's not as bad as it was today as it was in the past few hundred years, but it still is an issue. My grandparents, for example, were deeply religious. They were deeply Christian. My granddad actually got kicked out of multiple churches throughout his life, which led to my dad moving around quite a lot. So he was very deeply religious in what he believed in. So as much as I have love and respect for my granddad, at the same time, is that the right way to go about it, or is that just the ego talking in what you believe? Do you need to really go about arguing with different people about their beliefs? For me, it's more about live and let live. And I do think today you see a lot more. I'd say the reason I'm more curious as to like the Christian side of things these days is more about like the hatred towards it. I'm not sure if that's planned, but there seems to be more of a rise of like satanic behavior. I guess you could always argue that that's been around for 100 or so years, but maybe it's because it's more in our faces these days with the connectivity of like social media and stuff like that. A lot more people seem to be godless. There's a lot more atheists these days, and atheists, for what they believe in, are religious in a sense because they believe that they don't believe in anything, which is a belief in itself and is a religion. You're practicing, in a sense, what is sort of Satanism because you're doing what you want, do what thou will. It's essentially the same thing. So I think for me, it's trying to work out and discern what is the right thing, essentially. So I'm just going where the current takes me at the minute. I'm seeing what happens, if that makes sense. I don't want to tie myself into any particular label or sect or anything like that. I just want to have a relationship with a God, whatever form that takes, and see if that helps and benefits. But at the same time, I don't know, like you say, with the fear side of things, if it's a demonic figure leading me down a bad path, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of on the fence about everything at the minute.
Nice. I see. Yeah, that's interesting because I've never spoken about this topic with you guys. Like obviously, like we discussed like conspiracies and stuff like that. But I never was really sure like where you guys stand like spiritually and when it comes to religion and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we like to talk about conspiracies, but obviously we have our own personal beliefs, and it's just interesting to have these conversations and discuss. I think that's part of it, to be fair, is not knowing what the right thing is, because there's so much information out there these days and so many conflicting ideas. It's kind of hard to discern what is the right thing. So just to circle back to the father figure sort of thing, as I was saying about like God being a father figure and you being tested, it is kind of ironic at the same time that we see sort of a movement away from fathered households these days. It almost seems like the father has been taken out of the equation with the rise of things like, third wave feminism, which is quite radical. Getting the father out of the household seems like the obvious thing to do.
Yeah.
And that has then affected like the culture today and how people behave. It leads to more hedonism. It's almost like if this is like the final fall of the empire that we're living through, every empire lives for about 300 years, I believe, and then it falls. Like the Roman Empire lived through about 300 years, and then it eventually falls back into hedonism. It seems to line up as well with like the disparaging of like religion in the household as well, because people aren't as religious anymore as they were. My parents, for example, they don't really practice anything I don't believe anymore, and they gave me the freedom to go and work it out yourself, which seems good intentionally from an intention point of view. Seems good-hearted and good-willed, but at the same time, it has caused like a disorganization with the family. Do you know what I mean? Like my family's still quite strong, but I know at the minute, like families are completely skewed, and the idea of the family isn't as valued as it was in the past. And it sort of aligns with the idea that like religion's being brought out of the household as well. Do you think that is planned to a degree, or do you think that is cyclical and it probably happens just as a natural course of events?
No, I definitely think it's planned. And I think like what we're seeing right now, like such high divorce rates, such high like fatherlessness rates, I think it's the sign of a sick society. It's the sign of a society that's dying. It's funny because I saw this video the other day, like it was about Christianity as well. And it was, I think, sometime from the 1900s, and they were talking about like how to stop divorce rates. And they were like, divorce rates are so high right now, they're at 5%. And I was laughing, I was like, now it's like 10 times higher, now it's 50%, like half the marriages, they go to shit, right? And I definitely think that is planned, right? Because the father, like as we said earlier, like father figures, they stand for accountability, responsibility, right? Like for, like getting your shit together. Like you guys can probably relate to this, right? Like your dad is a way different authority figure than your mom. And like I said, like I think the reason why feminism, as you said, like tries to take it out, obviously because you don't have that accountability anymore, right? Like if you're a girl with dad, your dad is not gonna condone that you go around and like sleep with random guys, right? Like your dad will want the best for you, and he's like, what are you doing? Like treating yourself as an object. And so I think it's definitely like planned to like destroy the family. Like, and you guys, like you just said, like you studied this, like when empires fall, whatever, it's always when the family unit is destroyed that the nation falls, because then people are just left to do what they want by themselves. They don't have that accountability. And like fathers, they bring stability to the family, and then families bring stability to the nation, right? So I mean, like I think that's a big issue. Like you guys are aware of that as well, right? Just like how like masculinity in general is just being torn down, and like like people say like, oh, like we don't need men anymore, blah blah blah, all this bullshit. But like that's really like what keeps the nation going. And so I think it's definitely planned, because then like when the family's destabilized, then also like the children, they're left like seeking, like they don't really have the stability at home. They're like more easily influenced, like their mental health isn't as good, whatever. And then obviously like you can program them to believe whatever you want, right? Like you can program them to be like submissive slaves and follow programming that, let's say it isn't necessarily good to the world or like to the people following it. So I think like that's definitely like planned over the last 60 years or more, where we just saw like a huge increase in feminism and that kind of stuff. And at the same time, we saw, families weaken and like masculinity go down the drain and testosterone levels dropping. Everything's just, getting worse, in my opinion, when there's no families. And I think like a big thing of that is when you get rid of religion, because religion, I think like no matter what, like if that's like Islam, if that's Judaism, if that's Christianity, I think they all promote like having families at the core, right? And like building families and having that be the building block of society.
Absolutely, because most of these people that practice, Satanism, only backward practice. None of them practice a religion. So it's a big indicator that, these things that are going on in society, many people with broken families don't have a religion at all. So with that alone, it's because it's done intentionally. There's like a theory called Project Bluebeam where they're trying to look to get rid of religion and trying to get people to, I don't know, let's say, be all satanic and stuff and all that stuff as well. So, commonly in the modern world, you're seeing some backward practices, some backward groups. I don't want to say too much because, you get cancelled nowadays if you say your opinion. But you see all the, that stuff there, which is trying to be normalized, trying to be pushed to young kids in school, which is a disgrace in itself. And that alone is going to contribute to the fall of Western society after all.
Yeah. I think like going back to like my point earlier, like obviously like ask what you guys believe in, because I think like if we look at it from like a biblical perspective, right? In the Old Testament, it says you should have no other gods before me. And I saw an interpretation, I'm not sure like what his name was exactly. He's kind of like in the same kind of niche, like was like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, these kind of guys, was, I don't know, some political figure from that kind of like say like page of the political spectrum. But anyways, like he said that, like when he reads that, what the conclusion he draws is that you should have no other gods before me, is that we as humans, we are a species who worships, we need something to believe in, right? And so why that is in there is because if you believe in God, which is like the ultimate good, right, then that's what you believe in. So you don't believe in any false stuff, any stuff that is screwed and like kind of sick, right? And I think like now that we've taken all of that out, right, people still need an outlet to believe in something. And then we see like what happens, right? Like people start believing in themselves and people start believing in all of these lies that the world tells them, because they don't have the like one like moral authority that they believe in. So they're just left to figure it out themselves. And then that's where you, as I said earlier, like you can program them with whatever, right? And say, this is what you should believe in, right? And that's obviously like not the truth, and it's not the ultimate good. It's just very demonic programming, in my opinion.
Like God has been replaced with celebrities. Like people worship celebrities instead of God. It doesn't make any sense. And people give a lot of energy to these celebrities, even though these celebrities don't care that you even exist or don't even know that you exist after all. It's a very backward culture, but that's predominantly Western society in itself. So it's going to collapse sooner rather than later.
Definitely.
Yeah. To circle back again, I think men and women do need each other at the end of the day. There's a lot of talk of issues of like overpopulation and there's too many people on the earth and the resources are stretched, but I think that's far from the truth. It's mainly because we cram a lot of people into cities, into small areas, and everyone becomes so compact. But it's not actually representative of how the actual world is. Like if you went out in the countryside, there's so much land that's just unused, so much that could be fertilized. I mean, they're even talking about the fact that, like we were saying about Graham Hancock, there is actually now confirmed that there were cities and buildings in the Amazon rainforest. So you can essentially build anywhere. There's always space to like build. We're never really going to be too stretched in terms of resources. But that's the thing. If men and women are separated, there will be a reduction in population. So it is a sort of genocide in a way, because men and women aren't together, not coexisting. There's not that conjoining of energy, not the yin and yang. So there's no new life being brought in. And then obviously over time there's a reduction in population. And then, you know,
We got Bill Gates here helping with that.
That's what I mean. Like people like Bill Gates who openly admit that they want to decrease the population. Like that video came out a while ago, like maybe 10 years ago, where he's talking about all vaccinations is going to be a way that we can reduce the population. Not to, I know you're vaccinated, Julian, but you know what? It's what it is. Is what it is. I'm not saying that's fact, what I just said. I'm just saying that's what he said. I'm just quoting Bill Gates. Bill Gates. To take it back also to what Ngombe said, which is really interesting, it's sort of about the new age, and it kind of ties in with what you were saying about ego. So there is sort of another theory that the whole thing with the island that we know about and the destruction of the deep state and the ratting out of the evil and the underworld and things like that is actually sort of a double bluff played by the elites, in a sense, to make us think that those are the bad guys and those are the people that we need to rat out and get rid of. In that same instance, they will then bring in the solution, and there will be this this is supposedly the new world order that will arise from that. It's not necessarily that they'll win, the people like the WEF, Klaus Schwab, all these people, they'll get what they want and they'll be able to create these 15-minute cities. It's more that it's a double bluff, and they'll bring in the false light, because obviously we know that Lucifer is the false light. So from a Christian point of view, this is sort of a theory that revolves around that idea. I can't remember the name of the woman who was actually quoted saying it, where she talks about how bringing in sort of like a new age, this age of like enlightenment and the Christ consciousness, as they call it, and it's more worship of ego than anything.
Yeah.
And it's sort of to take away from God. And it may seem as though it's the right thing. And it may seem like a beautiful utopia that we've created on Earth because we've got rid of the deep state and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's more of like a false light and a false emergence of things that aren't real. So it's quite interesting. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that at all. If you believe that could be a possibility. I'm trying to find the name of this woman.
Yeah, kind of. I've heard that before, kind of, you know, like you create the problem and the solution. So then you give the people a problem and they like all like pinpoint the problem. And then obviously like you also have the solution prepared, what follows your programming. I haven't looked into it too much, but it makes sense. It's interesting to think about that they create both, or like that they create it in like an order where, you know, like one leads to the other, and then they can control that and like can lead people into that and kind of like seem like the saviors.
Yeah. So it's sort of like they're holding all the cards essentially. So if you've ever seen that Illuminati card game meme type thing, where have you heard of the Illuminati card game before?
No.
So there's a card game called the Illuminati card game. It's worth looking up, but it basically denotes a lot of situations that have happened in the past. So there's one called like the Tower, where it looks like it's the Twin Towers collapsing. There's one about like the 2008 financial crash. It almost seems as though they're holding all the cards, if that makes sense. And they've got all the players, and they can distribute all this sort of like false light, false information. They're the ones giving the tidbits about, say, like the island and all this stuff. It's all their work. So then people are more likely to buy into the solution, if that makes sense, because they think that all the good guys won. But you're subscribing to the wrong thing, if that makes sense. For example, like Trump. like we talk about, like Trump potentially being the false savior, the false hope, the Antichrist. What is the name of the card that basically gets rid of everything else? What's the word? It's the Trump card, isn't it? It's the card that trumps everything else. So Trump, ironically, from like an etymologist point of view, has the name that would suggest that he's going to be the one that comes over and gets rid of everything. I think that's why I'm so strong in the belief that he will win this year, because I think it's part of the script for him to win this year. I think he's the Trump card. There is actually a card in the Illuminati card game that looks a lot like Donald Trump as well.
Okay.
But, yeah, sorry to go off on a tangent, but it is actually quite interesting that possibly it is all planned out and they hold all the cards. So I guess it's more about being very vigilant, like in the current time, and to make sure that you stand on yourself and, you know, be more one with yourself and in like aware of what's going on around you. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah. Can't have a calcified pineal gland.
No.
Yeah, you need to get that decalcified right away.
Absolutely.
Did you ever do that?
Me?
Yeah. Did you ever like try to decalcify your pineal gland?
Well, like, you know, I'm trying to avoid like fluoride and that kind of stuff. And I know, like, I think there's like liquid iodine or something like that. A friend of mine like, took, and he says that it helps like decalcify it. But apart from that, like, I haven't really done too much. Like, basically just avoid what does calcify it. But should probably look into it more. Like, I think that like liquid iodine, that was quite interesting to like actually, you know, like cleanse it and like break it off.
Yeah, there was that and turmeric as well. I remember hearing about turmeric. Like, I've had turmeric for breakfast, but my pineal gland still feels pretty calcified, so I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't understand how you'd know, though, if it's decalcified. That's the thing. I never got that, because they'd always say, like, oh, in these New Age videos, if you watched them, you'd always be like, oh, you'd start being able to talk to people psychically, and you could see spirits, and you could feel the energy of the earth and stuff like that.
Yeah. But I think it's more like mentally. I feel like you're just more aware of like scams, you know, you just think more for yourself.
Yeah. Possibly. See, I always thought that was like more of like a demonic thing that was frowned upon by Christians. Maybe it's not, I don't know.
I don't know, to be honest. Like I just know like I don't want my pineal gland to be calcified. It's not about like opening your third eye, because that's like from what I understand, like opening that and opening your chakras, that's like gateways for like demons to get in, that kind of stuff. Like I haven't looked into it too much, but like I think it's more like the mental side of it, you know, like being able to like think clearly for yourself and coming up with your own opinions and stuff like that.
Yeah. Fair enough.
That's all that needs to be.
Like, we must have decalcified pineal glands in.
Yeah, for sure. But in terms of like chakra cleansing and all that, like I didn't even know that was even a thing. Like, you know, it doesn't really make sense. As long as you think clearly and you have, you don't even need to be intelligent. You just need to be aware of the reality you're in. Then all that extra stuff about cleaning chakras and pineal gland and third eye activation is silliness to me.
Yeah, that's just
to be fair, once had an experience with that. Like I've had chakra cleansing once.
How was
when I was like into the spirituality sort of thing. I don't know if I was invested enough in this scenario to actually experience what is supposed to happen. I did feel it, but at the same time, I'm not sure if I accidentally let any like demonic forces or anything like that in. It was like a cleansing of the heart chakra, and you're told to like essentially envision a green light around your heart, and then it's supposed to expel all this light, and you're supposed to like let go of everything. Essentially, it's a weird experience. It's very mental.
That does sound real. I'm not gonna lie. That's
No, probably
doesn't
not.
seem real, man.
I probably got dealt up, to be fair. I don't think it was too expensive, though. From what I
How
remember.
much was
Might have
it?
been like maybe 25 quid or something like that. I can't really remember, to be honest. It's a long time since I did it. Maybe more. Maybe more. Maybe it was like 100, but this is during lockdown. And I think lockdown, everyone was a bit like, don't know what to do with myself. It was kind of an excuse to get out of the house, to be honest.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not sure the average Joe would think that I'm bored, so I'm gonna empty my chakras. But hey, there's someone else, there's something else going.
Yeah, maybe I've got something else going on.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good place to end off with you boys. I feel
Yeah.
like it. Anything else to talk about?
Before Rowan gets too freaky with it.
Yeah, boy. Yeah, I think it's time to end it. And thanks, Julian, for coming on. And it's been a good one. And
Yeah, pleasure
Yeah,
to be here. Very grateful that you guys wanted to have me on here.
thanks a lot, man.
No, of
And
course.
Yeah, and as for the audience as well, thanks for tuning in if you've listened all the way through or listened. So thanks very much, guys, and we'll see you soon. Peace.
Peace.
This is the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, saying thank you so much, for tuning in for this episode of the OccultPod. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and also comment, because it helps the algorithm. Also, if you want to follow us on social media, go to @theoccultpod_13. That is for Instagram and Twitter. And have a great rest of your day, okay? Thank you so much.
And thank you to both Julian and Sean for joining us for two separate but equally amazing episodes of the podcast. We discussed brotherhood, religion, the state of the world right now, and why it's so important to have a community around you. And so it's only right that I plug the Freedom Seeker community, which is Julian and Sean's baby. If you go on Instagram, Freedom Seeker Community, you'll find the IG handle there. I'll put a picture up here. But if you want to join a group of like-minded individuals who are staying on top of the goals, keeping each other accountable, then I would highly recommend checking out the FSC. Even if it's just shooting them a DM, having a discussion with Sean and Julian and see where your goals lie, see what you want to do, see if it's the right thing for you. And yeah, thanks again for tuning in, guys, and have a great rest of your day.